Welcome to the Lead Out Loud podcast. I am Professor G. This is episode 60. It is called, Did They Not Know Where the X Came From? This is a direct quote that came as a result of a conversation between me and my guest, Mariam Lays. Mariam was on a previous episode, a couple of them actually, of the podcast, and here we are really just continuing a conversation that we were having offline and decided, this is good enough to record. So, did they not know where the X came from? Comes about as part of a conversation on generational differences and specifically naming of generations. But that's kind of what we get into on this conversation. We start off talking about Mariam's journey as a graduate student. She has an MBA from USC, and she started her MBA program right before the global pandemic began. So her experience was kind of split between this in-person and this hybrid remote chaos thing that ended up transpiring. So we talk a lot about, how do generational differences affect how people approach work and their views on work and maybe how they interact with other people. So it's an interesting conversation, and I'll let you get to it. Episode 60 starts right now. Well, so what do you think? You were in, you're getting your MBA and COVID hits. I am now teaching graduate students that for some of them, they were in undergrad during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I forget that. How do you think that has impacted our, say, young professionals? That's my target demographic with Lead Out Loud these days. So, how has that impacted young professionals and their abilities, or maybe even just culturally at work? Did it have an impact?
It's hard to say at work because it's hard to kind of differentiate what was an impact due to COVID versus what's just like a generational difference. And then with work, I guess how many years out are we now from COVID? 4? So there would be.
It depends. It depends on how you measure it.
I guess. Well, we went to lockdown 2020.
From the start, yes, we are 4.5 years.
Okay, 4.5 years. So some people were starting college and should now be entering the workforce, right? Some people were wrapping up college and entering the workforce. I don't know that I've worked with a lot of new college, so that would be like a new college hire. I haven't worked with enough of those to see, or to really speak on the impact that COVID had. But I have worked with Gen Zers, right? So I can kind of speak to more like the generational difference, or comment on that, but I don't know that I can comment on the COVID thing. But what do you see in your classroom? Like, that's interesting because the students you have in grad school were definitely in undergrad during COVID. So what are you seeing the shift there?
Well, they were, let's see, let's go back and do the math there. So 2020 to 2024, some of them, I guess a lot of them were, because my graduate students, most of them don't have a lot of work experience. So they were probably wrapping up, I think, is the category that they would fall into. They're either wrapping up or 2020, if they were graduating in, say, 2022, okay, so they experienced it. Mm-hmm. But my students also I have a lot of international students. So it's probably a little bit different there because a lot of them come from India. Well, what was it like in India versus the United States? How did India handle COVID? I don't know. I wasn't there. I've seen some of the reporting. But I'll go back and change the question because I'm not sure that you can extract the two from one another. We covered generational differences in my leadership class, and one of the things that we look at from traditionalists to Gen X to millennials to Gen Z It's like, okay, well, here's the typical attributes associated with their attitudes on work, for example.
Hmm.
Also, here's the world events that they were shaped by.
Right, right.
So those world events become they're part now of that generational mindset
Yeah.
because they had an impact. I mean, for me, it would be 9/11.
Yeah, I
I
was
was,
just talking about that yesterday with my nanny because she was born November of 2001, and I thought, you don't know a world before 9/11. She's like, yeah, no, my
yep,
mom was pregnant. And she said, do you remember that day? I said, oh my God, vividly. Like, it is, if you were there, if you were born before 9/11 and at least conform, have enough formed memories to remember it, like, you don't
yeah.
forget it, and it really shifted everybody's worldview. So it's funny that you, sorry, it's just, we were literally
No,
just talking about that yesterday. Yeah.
that's I mean that's exactly right. And you go back far enough, it's like, well, it was World War II.
Right.
Okay, well, it was the 70s. It was the AIDS. All the AIDS stuff. I think that was for Gen. Now I can't remember. I think that was Gen X. I'm right on the edge. So I think for millennials, it's 9/11 was the big thing.
Yeah.
And now, yeah, this generation, it's going to be,
COVID.
COVID.
And then Gen Alpha won't know COVID.
Also, why is it like? Can we just talk about the nomenclature for a
The
second?
Z
How did
to
we
Al.
go from traditionalists that like I kind of understand how we get to Gen X? It was sort of a sign of the times, perhaps. And then I think somebody was like, "Well, if that was X, this must be Y." Did
Yeah.
they not know where the X came from? Were they just lazy? Because then it's like, well, now it's Z, and then oh well, we're out of letters. Like, do they think that we started with Gen A and went all the way through, and so here we are 26 generations later?
Yeah.
I guess we're going to start over. How come they didn't go to AA
Or one.
or one or come up with a snazzy name?
Yeah.
The Covidians,
Covidians.
the Covennials.
I don't know. I don't know how that goes. I honestly, every time I have to try to differentiate between the generations, I end up having to Google it because I'm like, what are the generations? And I only know Alpha because my daughter was born in 2023, and I'm like, oh, okay, she's Gen Alpha. But that's all I know. I mean, we don't have enough data to know what they're going to be
No,
like, but
that's right. That's all we know. We don't even know how big that generation's going to be. Like what
right.
what the dividing line. Of course, there it depends on the social scientist you're talking to. How come they get to decide? Uh, but where that line gets drawn, yeah, who knows? I don't even
Yeah.
know then. So let's see. When does Gen Alpha start?
I don't know. I don't know when it
Because
starts. I
I
just
don't
know in
think it
2023.
includes my kids are Gen Z then, right?
Yes, your kids would be Gen Z. Yes. Um, I don't think Alpha started till pretty recently.
Okay. Um,
And you can
so
trust me
yeah.
because I am not a social
Well,
scientist.
and then we'll see what world events shape
Shape
their
them.
outlook.
It could be a landing on Mars.
It could be. It could be destroying an asteroid.
Ooh,
Apparently, we're doing that now.
Armageddon called.
I didn't even know. But yeah, they just launched a mission.
Wait, the second moon, they're destroying that?
The second moon, yeah, the one with the soundstage on it.
I thought, okay, all right.
So let's go back though to okay, you've got these generational differences, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to we're all at work together,
Yeah,
and there are sets of behaviors. Part of what defines the generations, or at least some of the attributes we try to assign. Oh, okay. The millennials, they don't care about anything, which I think is not necessarily true. But like they got a bad rap for a long time. Oh, they're
yeah.
just the millennials. They just want the next promotion. I do see
Which
some of that.
it was so that I was going to say I was researching, doing my online Reddit, scrolling, and a
Yeah,
lot.
you did research for the show.
I
Great.
did
That's
research for the show.
yeah. This
So
is
one of the I come
something
prepared,
exciting and new.
and so one of the things I didn't realize this, but Gen Z gets a bad rap for the same thing. So they are criticized for basically wanting to be promoted far too quickly, and all they care about is career progression. without doing their time. And I thought that was interesting because I remember thinking, well, I thought that was a criticism of millennials, and now millennials are saying the same thing about Gen Z. So then I started to question, did someone say that about the generations before?
Gen
Like, is
X?
this,
Yeah.
yeah, like what's is this a common theme from generation to generation where you always feel threatened by the next generation, so you want to hold on to your leadership role, and anybody that you see as ambitious, you perceive them as like, oh, they're trying to move up too quickly? Or is there truth in some of this? I mean, I don't know. It's just interesting to think about.
I suspect there's some of that is true. That that some of it is just the tropes that people use to describe the people younger than themselves. I remember I worked with somebody one time. I think we were doing some kind of a lean event, and somebody we were having trouble with a projector or whatever, and somebody says, "Call IT," and somebody goes, "Well, who's IT?" And this guy goes, "Anybody younger than we are." I think there's some of that, right? There's some of the like, okay, well, you're the new guy,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, so let's see what your thoughts are on this. I get this question a lot from students. Um, Professor, how do I get a job? What should I be doing? How do I get a job? And it's like, well, one of the things I tell them is like, there's no magic bullet. Okay, but what would your answer be? Because you were just saying how like, oh, dumb Miriam, like, oh, I thought you could just go get an MBA and Google's going to call and say, come work for us. That is the perception. That is the perception of a lot of people that are in college, either from this country or they come here from another country and they think, I'm going to go get a degree from an American university and then I'm going to get a job in America and I'm going to stay there and work and get a visa and all this stuff, right? So there's some nuance to the visa aspect of it, but the underlying question is still, I think, the same. And I think the answers are very much the same. And it is, well, how do I get a job? How do you get a job, Mariam?
If I knew I'd have one. No, no, I'm kidding. It's a good question, and it's unfortunate that the answer remains the same as it probably was 50 years ago, which is not knocking on doors and giving people your resume. Do not do that. You will just piss people off, and then they won't want to hire you at all. But the way to get a job is through your network, and then making sure that you're able to basically like tell your story and what value you're going to bring. So one of the things that I noticed because we hire I in my last role I had to review a lot of resumes for positions, and there's a couple things I picked up on, which is one, resumes are just straight up sloppy. I don't know what you people are doing in the age of Chat GPT and all these people on LinkedIn offering to review your resumes. It seems like nobody is taking any of that advice or leveraging, the career. Uh, I don't know what they're called. They called it career counseling at Clemson, but you could basically go and they'd help you
Yeah,
write your resume.
career
And there's a
services,
very
sure.
specific, yeah, and there's a specific format that you should be using. And I don't know when the disconnect happened, why we stopped following that format, but like go back to that, please. Because as somebody who reviews resumes, I don't want your resume to stand out. I don't want it to be artsy fartsy. I need it to read the same way the other resumes read so I can
Yeah.
quickly find the information I'm looking for, right? And typically it's like your name, your education, your professional experience, and then way down at the bottom, don't make it a two-pager if you have no years of experience. But if you have a little room, you could add skills, hobbies, interests. If you're in school and you haven't had any career experience, put relevant projects that you did, like your senior capstone project, and talk about what it is you achieved concisely. Write out the problem statement and then write what you did, the skills you used to solve the problem, and then what the result was. And then be prepared to speak to that in an interview. So sometimes you get a good resume, you get to the interview, the person can't tell the story, you're not really
Because they use
sure.
Chat GPT to come up with the
Yeah.
bullets on their resume.
So they can't tell the story. You can't tell if they actually did the work on the project or in their last role, or if they simply took credit for the stuff their team accomplished. It's okay. It's okay if you want to, if you were part of a team and you want to take credit for it, that's fine. But you need to be able to tell or explain how you achieved that result. You can't just say, "Oh, we got record-breaking sales numbers in the first month." And it's like, "Okay, cool, but how?" Because I
Right.
need to know that you know how to
And what was your
replicate that
role?
success. Yeah, what was your role? And are you going to be able to replicate that success in this next role? Because if you don't know how you did it the first time around, you sure as heck are not going to know how to do it this time around. So that's kind of the biggest gap that I noticed in when we were interviewing or even reviewing resumes. Yeah, just either sloppy resumes, typos, and it's like, come on, people, that send it to a friend and have them review it.
Well, and so this is part of my answer. Like this is not the popular answer. This is not what people want to hear. But oh, well, what do I need? How do I get a job? Well, you do the work.
Yeah,
Okay? And part of the work is yeah, you put your resume together and you're intentional about it and you put the work into the resume and you make sure there's no typos. Like if there's a magic bullet, that's it.
yeah,
That's part of it anyway. That's what one part that it's made of. Um, which is also, by the way, this is just, I have to put in a shameless plug for my resume workshop available in the Lead Out Loud Lounge
that's right.
at lolworkshop.com.
Link in bio.
Link in bio, right. You can actually access it for free with code STUDENT. Ooh, don't tell anyone. Okay.
STEWDENT.
Did you say SCE?
STEW.
Yeah, STEW.
Cut the joke.
Oh my gosh.
I've
You know
lost all
what?
credibility.
I'm gonna add that. I'm gonna add that as a discount code now, and then it's gonna charge people double.
That's right.
No, but so I mean, look. Here's the other thing. I get these questions so much, and when I review resumes, I see so many of the same problems. I actually created a workshop, a video module on it.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like if you've got okay, so there's a stack of people, stack of candidates, and I have to differentiate. They
Right.
all have an engineering degree. They all have a master's degree. How do I decide? Well, this one can't spell the name of our company correctly. They're out.
Right.
This
Right.
one didn't put a period after their third bullet, but they have periods after all the other bullets. Okay, they're out. I mean, it can be that silly because you just have to draw a line somewhere. But I want to go back to what you said a minute ago. Why did we get away from the format? I tell people this all the time. Function over form when it comes
Yeah.
to the resume. I get it. You want it to look beautiful. You want it to be the Elle Woods perfumed paper. Nobody's going to get that reference, but
I got it.
did you? I was trying to think of when that movie came out because I know you don't do movies that occurred before you were born,
This
but I
was
think I
after.
think that was after.
Yes.
Um,
Elle Woods inspires me every day. I even had her little like Tiffany bracelet with the.
Look, I went through a phase like that too, where
Yeah.
I spent years in college. My roommate was a graphic designer, so I had resumes that were beautiful, not very functional, but beautiful. Hey, you want to have a beautiful resume? Fine, make that, print it out, take it with you to the interview.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
before that, it's got to be functional because you got to let people get through it. And the other thing that's in my resume workshop, you already said it. Now we're giving it all away for free, but oh my gosh, the people that have had 2 internships, maybe 3, they've got their degree and 3 internships, and their resume is 2 pages or 3 pages long. I'm like, bro, dude, uh-uh.
I know.
I've been working for 25 almost years now. My
Right.
resume is 2 pages. That's all you get. You're going to have to start. You, you need to figure out how to tell me what you need to tell me in less. And
Yes.
if you can't do that, you're not right for this role.
Which actually is something you're being judged on as well.
For sure.
Because being able to being able to give the information in a concise way is very important in the workplace. Like if you don't know how to filter down what you need to say into one paragraph, I don't want you on my team because I don't want to receive emails of novels of things that aren't telling me anything, right? Again, style over substance. It's like, I don't care that you're great with graphic arts. Like, that's great. I'm happy for you. Do that on your Instagram and your TikTok and whatever else you're on. But, but for the workplace emails, like, I need you to get to the point. And if you don't know how to do that, well, that's, to me, that's a skill set. And that's something I'm evaluating you on when I read your resume. And so one of the things I was thinking about before we recorded was the differences with Gen Z in the workplace, right? And the things I've noticed that just kind of like what the perception is and things that they're being judged on. So, and this ties to what you were talking about on the resume, where sometimes you have a period, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's a full sentence, sometimes it's like not a full sentence, it's just a bullet point.
Fragment.
Yeah, fragment. Yeah,
A random thought.
Or a run-on sentence.
Words.
Yeah. Something that a lot of people criticize the newer generation on is their communication style. And again, that's something you're being judged on when you submit a resume. So if you're submitting a resume and it's sloppy or inconsistent, that's going to be held against you in a way, or it's going to reflect poorly. It's going to reflect poorly on you because it's going to show that you're not detail oriented. And when somebody receives a resume, what you think when you look at it is that the applicant spent all this time and they're putting their absolute best foot forward. And if your best foot forward is this sloppy mess, like, I don't want you on my team, right? And maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's...
No, it's not unfair. It's not unfair because, look, one of two things is most likely true. Number one, you're right. This was their best effort, and their best effort fell short.
Right.
Number two, this is not their best effort. Why wasn't it their best effort? Okay, that still falls short.
Yeah, true.
So that it's totally fair.
Yeah. I think the difference, though, is that then also, if you get hired, whatever. So one of the biggest criticisms is basically in the style of communication. Very, very informal with the newer generation. It's very informal. It's very straightforward, which is good. It's good to be straightforward, but also sometimes you do have to soften your communication style if you're talking to an external customer versus an internal one. And because their style's a little bit different and they're not necessarily given the training they need on what the expectation is for communication, it can reflect negatively. Like, it can be perceived as you being unprofessional. So some people are gonna like really hate me for this, but when you are addressing a customer, you shouldn't, unless you really know this person, you should not say, "Hi, Sean." It should be, "Dear Sean, comma."
Dear listener, comma. That's the end of this episode. We're going to pick up where this conversation leaves off in episode 61. That will be released soon, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you enjoy these conversations and you want a little bit maybe more tutorial-type content, more instructional content related to leadership or career progression, especially if you're early career, and especially if you are a early career or young professional engineer, I have the Lead Out Loud Lounge, which has two components to it. One is a paid component that's got some more stuff for organizations, but I also have a free version on YouTube. It's accessible through lolworkshop.com. If you head over there, there's a link to it, and I put all kinds of YouTube content onto the YouTube portion of the LOL Lounge, and it's free. So take a look at that, hit the subscribe button so that you are always getting the latest updates, and we'll see you here again for episode 61 coming up real soon.